Madam Speaker. Now, one thing becomes very clear from our study of history, and that is that things that nations do have consequences. Things we do individually have consequences, and things we do as a nation have consequences. And that's why some people remember that on May 30th, 2010, there were 6 flotilla ships, and this is from UN releases, a report into last year's raid, how events unfolded, dated 2 September 2011. So it points out that May 30th, 2010, 6 flotilla ships leave Cyprus for Gaza in an attempt to break Israel's naval blockade. The Turkish cruise liner Mavi Mara is chartered by Islamic charity IHH and carries 581 of the 700 flotilla activists. And we know that didn't turn out so well. Israel did have a legitimate right to blockade the Gaza Strip, where to prevent more rockets, more munitions from being brought into the Gaza Strip that was being used to fire on, kill, and terrorize Israelis. But again, actions have consequences, and many remember the flotilla coming on and challenging the blockade, and there were people who were killed. But if you go back, here's an article stated also May 30th, 2010, which was a Sunday, but it points out, and this is an article from the Washington Times, entitled, "Israel Assails Resolution on Nuke Weapons as Flawed," and it's talking about an agreement that President Obama was trying to get done, a non-proliferation agreement. And the article points out that on Friday, which is May 28, 2010, a U.S. delegation in New York voted to endorse a consensus document ending the 2010 Review Conference for the Non-Proliferation Treaty that calls for a conference in 2012 to discuss a weapons of mass destruction free zone in the Middle East. The final document of the month-long review conference calls on Israel to join the treaty, a move that would require Israel to disclose and then give up its undeclared nuclear arsenal. This was viewed and discussed as being the first time in people's memory when the United States, by and through its administration, the Obama administration, had taken an act that was very adverse to Israel in the international community, and particularly in the UN. Normally, we did not side with Israel's enemies, but one of the lessons that I was taught by history professors at Texas A&M was that when a nation's enemies see that nation's strongest ally pulling away, it's provocative. It often provokes action by that nation's enemies against it because they think their strongest ally is pulling away. Some saw that in before the war in Korea. They thought that the United States might have North Korea beyond its sphere of influence. Those kind of things, those words, these actions, these votes can be provocative. So 2 days after the United States sides with Israel's enemies in demanding that Israel disclose its nuclear weapons, the flotilla launches to challenge the blockade. Isn't that amazing? Just happens to be right after this administration sides with Israel's enemies. Here comes a challenge to Israel's blockade that was just trying to save Israeli lives. Well, the reason that it's important to point these things out now is what's happening between the United States and Iran as we leave Israel out of the equation, even though it's Israel that is considered to be the little Satan and we're considered the great Satan, and Israel is probably to be the first attacked if there is an attack. They're certainly the most vulnerable, and yet we leave our former friend Israel equation. And it brings to mind a number of things that have been happening during this administration that have caused the vast majority of people in Israel, of Israeli citizens, to believe that this Obama administration is not concerned about Israel's best interest. And there are many who have been aware of Scripture, and it has often been a guide in our relation with Israel. And it's really such a historically appropriate thing in this House of Representatives, especially if we were down the hall in the former House chamber, now called Statuary Hall, where they used to hold church every Sunday through most Sundays during the 1800s. Up until the late 1800s, the largest church congregation was in the House of Representatives. And it was not considered to be violative of the Constitution because it didn't endorse a particular religion. It was considered non-denominational. But Scripture was read regularly, every week down the hall. Thomas Jefferson had coined the phrase separation of church and state as being appropriate, didn't find it offended that notion, and in fact at times would bring the Marine band to play hymns. So it seemed appropriate when we talk about Israel to talk about Israel's roots, because in Genesis 12, this is the King James Version, now the Lord had said unto Abram, get thee out of thy country and from thy kindred, thy father's house, unto a land that I will show thee. And I will make thee a great nation, and I will bless thee and make thy name great. And thou shalt be a blessing, and I will bless them that bless thee, and curse them that curse thee. And in thee shall all families of the earth be blessed. So Abram went to the land of Canaan, later became Israel, just as God had promised in these verses. So it was no accident that just minutes after Israel became a nation, the United States, through its president, Harry Truman, became the first nation in the world to recognize what was prophesied throughout the Old Testament about Israel returning after its absence. Israel returned, and Harry Truman made sure we were the first nation that recognized them as an independent nation. The UN had voted unanimously because of the Holocaust and over 6 million Jews being killed. They wanted to ensure that another Holocaust would never happen again. And that brought about Israel being reestablished in the land that they had possessed, and part of the land they had possessed 3,000 years before. So it was deeply troubling in 2012 when, and this is an article from the Washington Post, David Ignatius, is Israel preparing to attack Iran? Because it's considered a betrayal of an ally. Warn an ally's enemies that that ally may take self-defensive action to prevent being attacked. And the United States and Iran, including President Obama, have said repeatedly, he has promised an American-Israeli gathering here at the convention center that he will never allow Iran to have nuclear weapons, that it is an existential threat to Israel. It certainly is. So we've been hearing behind the scenes for a number of years that this administration was telling Israeli leaders, don't you dare attack Iran without our permission. We'll take care of this. We won't let them have nuclear weapons. And yet it's not the United States that is first threatened. The great Satan, the United States in the eyes of leaders in Iran, not the Iranian people, but Iran leaders, would get around to attacking us. But first, Israel is threatened. So there was concern, obviously, here in Washington and the Obama administration that the reported threats to Israel not to defend themselves without our permission, even though no nation should ever need permission from another to defend itself. And even our President Obama said out here at the convention center to American-Israeli group, and Prime Minister Netanyahu reminded me of our president's words, and I went back and looked them up. Sure enough, he said, Israel must defend itself by itself. Our president said that. And yet, if we're not going to help Israel defend itself, which is actually defending us as well, then shouldn't we avoid jeopardizing Israel's own self-defense? Yet here's this article, dated February 2nd, 2012. Says Defense Secretary Leon Panetta has a lot on his mind these days, but cutting the defense budget to managing the drawdown of U.S. forces in Afghanistan. But his biggest worry is the growing possibility that Israel will attack Iran over the next few months. Panetta believes there's a strong likelihood that Israel will strike Iran in April, May, or June before Iran enters what Israelis described as a zone of immunity to commence building a nuclear bomb. Very soon, the Israelis fear the Iranians will have stored enough enriched uranium in deep underground facilities to make a weapon, and only the United States could then stop them militarily. That is a betrayal of our ally Israel. That is a gross betrayal of our ally Israel. We're supposed to be on the same side. And if Israel defends themselves, it's defending us as well, whether we recognize it or not. That was a betrayal of Israel. To leak what we believed, this administration believed was their plans to defend itself. If we're not going to defend ourselves, for heaven's sake, at least allow Israel to do it without putting them more in jeopardy. So by leaking that, obviously it was this administration to Israel, well, you better not go when you were thinking you were going to go, because they're going to be ready, because we warned your enemy for you. So we get to May. And obviously the window that Israel may have been considering attacking had to pass because of the leak by our own administration to Israel's enemies through the Washington Post, an intentional leak. Then we get, well, this is from March 29th of 2012. Israelis suspect Obama media leaks to prevent strike on Iran, by Alexander Marcotte from ABC News. Two reports today about Iran's nuclear program and the possibility of an Israeli military strike have analysts in Israel accusing the Obama administration leaking information to pressure Israel not to bomb Iran and for Iran to reach a compromise in upcoming nuclear talks. That is simply outrageous. This article says, continuing that same article, the first report in Foreign Policy quotes anonymous American officials saying that Israel has been given access to air bases by Iran's northern neighbor, Azerbaijan, from which Israel could launch airstrikes or at least drones and search and rescue aircraft. Article goes on, quote, it seems like a big campaign to prevent Israel from attacking, analyst Yoel Guzhansky at the Institute for National Security Studies told ABC News. Quote, I think the Obama administration is really worried Jerusalem will attack and attack soon. They're trying hard to prevent it in so many ways. The Foreign Policy Report by Mark Perry quotes an intelligence officer saying, quote, we're watching what Iran does closely, but we're now watching what Israel is doing in Azerbaijan, and we're not happy about it, unquote. Further down, in recent weeks, the Obama administration shifted from persuasion efforts vis-a-vis decision makers in Israel's public opinion to a practical targeted assassination of potential Israeli operations in Iran. Ben Yishai writes, quote, the campaign's aims are fully operational to make it more difficult for Israeli decision makers to order the Israeli Defense Forces to carry out a strike. And what's even graver, to erode the IDF's capacity to launch this strike with minimal casualties. We're putting Israel's own forces at far greater risk for casualties. Is that something that an ally does to a friend? Some of us believe that the Bible is accurate. Certainly been so many prophecies fulfilled. And if that's true, this administration, unless they can find a verse that accurately says that those who betray Israel will be blessed, then this country is being dug a deeper hole by this administration and its betrayals of Israel's trust and Israel's friendship. Then, this is from November 3rd, 2013 of this year. From the blaze, fury, scandalous, Israel conveys bitter protest to Obama administration over reported White House security leak. It says the Israeli government conveyed, quote, bitter protests, unquote, to the White House this week over the Obama administration's reported leak of who was behind last week's air raid on a Syrian base near the port city of Latakia. Words being used by the media and officials speaking anonymously in Israel to describe what they perceive as a breach in trust on the part of the United States include fury, scandalous, baffled, unthinkable. This administration continues to betray our friend, our ally, Israel. Other things that have happened in the past were comments made by President Obama to President Sarkozy in 2011 at a G20 summit, which were belittling Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Comments in 2011 that Israel should return to its 1967 borders that would have subjected it to relentless attacks and vulnerability were not helpful to our friend and ally. The Obama administration's failure to condemn Palestinians' building of illegal settlements, yet constantly criticizing Israeli housing plans for East Jerusalem. The Obama administration's decision to eradicate the missile defense programs that would have helped Israel as well as the United States. Leaving Prime Minister Netanyahu in 2010 for over an hour in the White House meeting room while President Obama dined with his family and refused to take a picture with him was not a friendly gesture. Secretary of State Hillary Clinton announced the Obama administration planned to send $147 million to the West Bank and Hamas-run Gaza. President Obama stated that all his, quote, friends in Chicago were Jewish, unquote, and says he was sometimes being accused of being a Jewish puppet. The Obama administration leaked to the Washington Post of the time window in which Israel would take out Iran's nuclear program. The Obama administration leaked to the media that Israel was going to use the Azerbaijan airspace to take out Iran's nuclear program. We placed immense pressure on Israel not to defend itself without the United States' permission. The Obama administration has never rejected or condemned the racist, hateful teachings about Jewish people going on in Palestinian schools in the Middle East and in some Muslim schools in the United States. President Obama traveled to Turkey, Iraq, Saudi Arabia, and Egypt and apologized to them on behalf of the United States. Obama administration's support for the Muslim Brotherhood's rise to power in Egypt, as well as throughout the Middle East, though the Muslim Brotherhood had never backed away from their demand for a non-existence of Israel. The Obama administration continues to support the Muslim Brotherhood's return to power in Egypt when Egypt is where the Muslim Brotherhood turned violent on Morsi's arrest because of his violation of the Constitution that did not provide for impeachment after the Egyptian people turned out in the millions to demand his removal. It was not a coup, as the Christian Pope in Egypt told me. It was not a coup. This was the people rising up and demanding removal. And yet this administration now has cut off support because Egypt does not want the group, the Muslim Brotherhood, that was killing Christians, terrorizing the nation. We want them back in charge. This administration does. It's an outrage. Though the Syrian leader Assad has been ruthless in killing and abusing his people, has not been helpful to Israel to the extent of the Egyptian leader Mubarak was, this administration has not done anything but put Israel in more jeopardy by its actions in Syria. So we have not been terribly helpful to our friend Israel. And it doesn't sound like that we are actually blessing Israel. It sounds like we are cursing Israel, belittling its leaders, marginalize its efforts to defend itself, which also inures to our benefit. My oath of office is to this country. When I was in the Army for 4 years, my oath was to this country. My allegiance continues to this country. And I believe that being Israel's friend is helpful to this country, and that's why I so strongly support being a friend to Israel. And even if you took the Bible completely out, you took out most anything except just looking at the Middle East and who believes in the value of life like we do here in the United States, who believes more in democratic actions like we do in the United States, then Israel should certainly be our friend. But what this administration is doing with Iran is foolhardy. It is foolhardy. And thank God for France. They didn't wave a white flag of surrender. They said this is a terrible deal. Thank goodness they slowed it down, because this administration thinks they're just new and everything they try will work perfectly. Hello, Obamacare. Well, it doesn't work any better when they try to mess with our friendships and reward our enemies and hurt our friends. So in the few minutes that are remaining, Madam Speaker, I'd like to reference back to the New York Times article by Barry James, October 21st, 1994, during the Clinton administration. The director of the International Atomic Energy Agency expressed skepticism Thursday about the U.S.-North Korea nuclear agreement, saying it could delay inspections by the agency. Officials at the agency, some U.S. Republican senators and politicians in South Korea criticized the accord, saying they feared Pyongyang had bought itself another 5 years of secrecy, thus concealing whether it has reprocessed enough plutonium to build one or more nuclear weapons. The Energy Agency says it needs to inspect 2 nuclear waste dumps to be able to answer the question. North Korea has never conceded the existence of the dumps. It would be in the interest of all concerned that a prolonged delay be avoided, said the agency director Hans Blix. But he added, we're better off with the agreement than with none at all. We have to worry about how much they have squirreled away, an agency official said. Blix thinks 5 years is a long time to have to wait for our inspectors to gain access to the facilities we need to see, including the 2 facilities the North Koreans have never declared. But under the agreement that the Clinton administration reached, North Korea agreed to place in storage the fuel removed last spring from a 5-megawatt graphite reactor containing plutonium for 4 or 5 nuclear bombs. U.S. Republican senators protested in a letter to President Bill Clinton that this reversed long-standing U.S. policy because it allowed the North Koreans to hang on to their spent fuel rods and would delay for several years the inspection of suspect sites. The accord shows it is always possible to get an agreement when you give enough away, said Senator Bob Dole of Kansas. The deal also has been heavily criticized in South Korea. Many there see it as a diplomatic triumph for Pyongyang, which failed to dispel doubts about its nuclear intentions. As part of the pact, which will be signed in Geneva on Friday, the United States will head an international consortium to provide North Korea with an interim supply of fuel to overcome its chronic energy shortage and eventually 2,000-megawatt light water reactors. In exchange, North Korea will abandon its existing nuclear facilities and renounce any plans to build nuclear weapons. Gee, doesn't that sound familiar? This administration is repeating the same mistakes of Madeleine Albright and Bill Clinton as president. They're running to Iran that cannot be trusted, that has lied repeatedly, just like North Korea did. And how did the Clinton deal work out? Yeah, they took the nuclear facilities we provided them, but they didn't stand good behind their promise not to develop nuclear weapons. They developed them and we helped them. And now this administration wants to do the same thing with Iran. We're still paying for the mistakes of the Clinton administration with North Korea, helping them get more nuclear power. And now this administration wants to do that with Iran. That's a huge mistake. We need to help our friend Israel. Stop betraying them. Help our friends. Stop rewarding our enemies, because the consequences to this nation will be dire if we don't turn this around. Madam Speaker, it is my prayer, it is my hope that this administration will turn from its stupid ways. The arrogance that existed before Obamacare kicked in surely should have come down a notch, so that they can realize maybe we're making a mistake in dealing with bloodthirsty people in Iran as well. This country's future is at stake. That ought to be enough to make this administration slow down and realize they're about to make another huge mistake that we will pay for generations if they don't stop. Iran will certainly not stop, just as North Korea did not. They gotten help from North Korea. They learned the lesson from North Korea. It's time this administration learned a lesson from our mistake and a mistake of the Clinton administration and Madeleine Albright. I yield back.